There's no easy way to explain the slow unraveling of your place in a family. It's not one moment, it's hundreds. A chipped word here, an ignored celebration there. It all builds until one day you realize the people you live with don't see you. Not really. I was 14 when my life started to tilt. My mom had remarried a man named Tom, and with him came Jake, his son, 3 years older than me. Right away, we didn't click. It wasn't full-on war at first, more like the tension that buzzes in the background when two strangers are told they're now siblings. Jake was messy and loud. He left dirty dishes in the sink like they'd vanish on their own. Spoiler alert, I was the one who got blamed when they didn't. My shampoo disappeared faster than usual, and somehow Jake's perfectly styled hair always looked suspiciously like it came from using my favorite brand. But it was more than the petty things. It was Tom's cold eyes every time something went wrong. His default setting was suspicion, and it was always pointed at me. If a door was left open, a plate chipped, or someone raised their voice, he assumed it was my fault. He didn't ask questions. He passed judgment. Mom, trying so desperately to build her perfect blended family, brushed everything under the rug. She told me to be patient, to help the family come together. And then, a year later, came the baby news. They were having a baby, a real family, they said with beaming smiles. They needed to make space. That's when they chose my room for the nursery, not Jake's room. Jake was older, had already moved out briefly for college. But mine. I was shoved into the cramped guest room with barely enough space for a bed and a few drawers. No discussion, no apology, just a decision. And it hit me like a quiet slap. I was no longer considered permanent. Then came Nathan, the baby, the miracle, the center of their world. And Jake, he came back home too, dropped out of college and returned like a king. He brought friends over at all hours, threw parties with loud music and stinking beer bottles, while I tried to sleep with headphones on and a pillow over my head. When I complained, Tom scoffed, "You're being dramatic." Mom gave me those sad eyes and whispered, "Let it go, honey. Jake's just going through a rough patch." I started spending more and more time away from home. At school, I joined every club that would take me. Debate team, yearbook, drama, anything that let me stay out longer. At friends' houses, I did homework, watched TV, even napped on their couches just to avoid going home. That house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a hotel room I was overstaying. Then came the night that changed everything. I got home late from a study session and saw a note on the fridge. "Gone to dinner, don't wait up." No names, no mention of me, no invitation, just a note. They'd gone out without me. Again, and didn't even think I'd care. I remember standing in the kitchen, the fridge humming behind me, the silence pressing down hard. I was 14 and already feeling like a tenant in my own life. That night, I stopped pretending. I stopped hoping things would magically get better. That night, I understood. I wasn't really part of this family. The quiet resentment I had been holding inside slowly turned into resolve. I knew I couldn't stay in that house much longer. My name is Jessica Evans, and by the time I turned 17, I had one goal: get out and never look back. It's strange how some of the loudest moments in life are the ones that come wrapped in silence. One evening, I walked through the front door to find the house filled with stale beer and the sickly sweet smell of cologne and fast food. Jake had thrown another party. My bedroom door, which I always locked, had been kicked in. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but the moment I stepped inside, my heart sank. My science project, something I had spent weeks building for the regional competition, was in pieces on the floor, stained with beer. A lamp was shattered, my mattress had footprints, and my journal was missing. I looked around, dazed. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen in disbelief. That project meant everything to me. It was my shot at winning a scholarship, a real chance to go to college far away. But to them, just a casualty of Jake's good time. At breakfast the next morning, I confronted them. I could barely get the words out before Tom's face tightened into that smug, condescending expression I'd come to know too well. "You should have taken better care of your things," he said, sipping his coffee. Not a single word about Jake, not even a glance in his direction. Mom looked at her plate. She didn't speak, not even a whisper of comfort. Just that same tired sigh and the usual line. Families have to learn to let go sometimes. Let go? Let go of what? My dignity? My right to privacy? I remember walking back to my room, stepping over the broken glass still littering my carpet, and thinking, this isn't my home. I was a guest, a problem, a placeholder in a family I had never truly belonged to. From that moment, everything shifted. I threw myself into school. I joined the science club, stayed late for tutoring, and picked up a part-time job at a local bookstore. Every dollar I earned, I tucked away. Not for clothes or gadgets like the other kids. I was saving for freedom. My safe haven became my best friend Chloe's house. Her parents welcomed me like I was one of their own. Her mom baked cookies on Sunday nights. Her dad taught me how to check my car's oil. They let me use their dining room for my next project. And for the first time in years, I felt normal. But at home, I was a ghost. Jake strutted through the house like a king, blasting music, hosting friends, trashing the place. Tom didn't mind. He's just blowing off steam, he'd say, and Nathan, my tiny half-brother, was treated like royalty. If he sneezed, the whole house rushed to his side. Me? I could be bleeding, and they'd ask if I'd made a mess on the carpet. One weekend, I stayed at Chloe's for 2 nights straight. When I came home, no one had noticed I'd been gone. No calls, no texts, no concern. I sat in the living room watching my family laugh at some sitcom, and I felt like I was looking at them through a glass wall. I wasn't part of this family. I was just a shadow living among them. And so, I made my decision. I would leave, not just eventually, not someday soon. I had saved enough for 3 months of rent. I found a small apartment near campus, tiny, a little drafty, but mine. I started packing my things in secret, every notebook, every photo, every fragment of who I was. I didn't tell them, not yet, because deep down I knew when I did, it wouldn't be met with love. It would be war, and I was ready. I still remember the way the morning light filtered through my cracked blinds the day I told them I was leaving. It was a Saturday, early spring, the kind of day that usually meant spring cleaning or family errands, but not for me. That day, I had a different kind of plan. I had rehearsed the words in my head so many times I thought they'd come out smoothly, but when I sat Mom and Tom down at the kitchen table, my palms were sweating and my stomach was in knots. "I'm moving out," I said quietly. You could have heard a pin drop. Tom set his coffee cup down harder than necessary. "Excuse me?" His voice was sharp, like I'd insulted him personally. "I found a place near campus," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I've saved enough for the first few months. I'll still work. I'll manage." Mom just stared at the floor, her lips pressed into a thin line. Tom, on the other hand, leaned back in his chair like I just told him I was joining a cult. "You think you're ready to live on your own?" he scoffed. "Because you've got a part-time paycheck and a pile of textbooks? That's laughable." "I'm not asking," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I'm informing you." That's when the accusation started. Tom said I was selfish, ungrateful, abandoning the family. He went on about how Nathan looked up to me, how I was setting a bad example, how I was going to fail and come crawling back. Mom finally spoke up, but not to support me. "Families stay together," she whispered. "You'll regret this one day." But deep down, I knew I wouldn't. I had regretted staying far too many times to doubt leaving. I moved the following weekend. Chloe and her parents helped me haul my boxes into the modest apartment. It wasn't much, just a small studio with beige carpet and creaky floors, but it was mine. No one could walk in without knocking. No one would throw parties in my room. No one would tell me I didn't belong. That first night, I lay on a borrowed mattress on the floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the quiet hum of city traffic outside my window. And even though my chest felt heavy with sadness, there was a strange peace underneath it all. Freedom, I realized, sometimes feels like loneliness, but it's a kind of loneliness that brings healing. For the first few weeks, Mom didn't reach out. Not a call, not a message. Tom certainly didn't bother. Jake? He probably didn't even notice I was gone. But Chloe noticed. So did her parents. My boss at the bookstore let me pick up extra shifts to help cover bills. A professor I liked gave me tips on applying for local scholarships. For the first time in my life, I felt like people were showing up for me, not out of obligation, not because we shared DNA, but because they saw something in me worth encouraging. One afternoon, maybe a month after I moved out, I got a call from my mom. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was oddly flat. "Tom's updating his will," she said. "Just thought you should know. He's decided to include Jake and Nathan, but not you." There it was, the final nail. I had spent years trying to earn a place in that family, only to be officially reminded that I was never really a part of it. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just said, "I understand," and hung up. But that night, as I lay in my tiny apartment, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was done. Done chasing their approval. Done feeling less than. Done being the girl left out of the will because she didn't share a bloodline. They had made their choice, and now I was finally making mine. Life had finally begun to settle into a rhythm I could call mine. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I had my own space, a small group of friends, and a quiet sense of peace that came from no longer having to walk on eggshells. Then one afternoon, everything changed with a single unexpected phone call. "Am I speaking with Jessica Evans?" The voice on the other end asked, formal and polite. "Yes, this is Jessica," I replied cautiously, recognizing that tone from movies and legal dramas, the kind that usually meant trouble. "This is Mr. Langford. I'm an estate attorney calling on behalf of Margaret Evans." The name hit me like a faint memory. Aunt Margaret, distant relative, quiet, reclusive, the kind of person who sent holiday cards with calligraphy handwriting and never made family events. "I'm sorry to inform you that Margaret passed recently," he continued. "She named you as the sole beneficiary of her estate." I nearly dropped the phone. I don't understand. Why me?" I stammered. "She left a letter for you explaining her decision. I'll be forwarding it along with the necessary documents, but I can tell you, she left you everything: properties, investments, a trust fund valued at around $3 million. $3 million. The number didn't even feel real. When I finally hung up, I sat frozen in my little apartment, staring at the wall. My brain couldn't process it. Margaret and I weren't close. I hadn't seen her in over a decade. Why would she do this? The answer came a few days later when Mr. Langford's package arrived. Nestled between the thick legal documents was a single handwritten letter. "Jessica, I've watched your journey from afar. You reminded me of myself when I was young, determined, overlooked, and stronger than anyone around you realized. I know your path hasn't been easy, and I know you've carried more pain than you deserved. This gift isn't about money. It's about giving you what I never had: freedom. Freedom to choose your life without begging for permission. Use it to live boldly, love deeply, and protect the fire inside you that no one has ever truly appreciated. Until now." With love, Margaret, I cried reading it. Ugly, silent sobs that racked my entire body. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life, someone had seen me. Not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as someone worthy. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not even Chloe. It felt too sacred. I wanted to protect that moment, that rare sense of being chosen. I met with financial advisors, bought a modest but beautiful home just outside town. Nothing extravagant, just something that felt mine. I even invested in a rental property for income, thinking ahead for once, instead of scrambling week to week. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about proving anything. It was about building something with no strings attached. And for a brief, golden time, it was perfect. Quiet mornings, the smell of fresh coffee in my own kitchen, windows open to the breeze, evenings curled up with a book. I had no one to impress, no one to answer to. For once, I didn't have to explain my existence or justify my choices. Then, as always, the past found a way to reach for me again. It started with a cousin I barely remembered, suddenly popping up on Facebook with a friend request and a curious message. "Hey Jess, heard about Aunt Margaret's estate. Congrats, that's wild." I never replied, but I knew then the secret was out, and my old family, the one that once cut me out of their will, was about to come crawling back. I should have known the silence wouldn't last. The moment Aunt Margaret's inheritance became public knowledge, my world shifted again, but not in the liberating way it had just weeks before. It started slowly, a trickle of messages, but that trickle quickly turned into a flood. The first message came from my mother. It was unnervingly cheerful. "Hi, sweetheart, just wanted to check in. We haven't talked in so long. I heard from cousin Liz that Margaret left you something. That's so wonderful for you. You always deserved a little good fortune." I stared at the screen, stunned by the sudden warmth in her words. Words I hadn't heard in years. No mention of the time she stood by while Tom cut me from his will. No apology for treating me like a tenant in my own childhood home. Just fake smiles and a clear ulterior motive hiding behind every sentence. Then came the call from Tom. He didn't even bother with small talk. "I know things have been strained, Jessica, but family pulls through for each other. We've hit some financial rough patches, and your mother and I were thinking, maybe you could help out with some of the medical bills and Nathan's tuition. Just a small contribution. After all, Margaret was technically from your dad's side. It's kind of a family thing, you know?" I don't know what surprised me more, that he had the nerve to ask, or that he genuinely believed I would say yes. What followed was a relentless barrage. Cousins I hadn't seen in a decade sent me long-winded messages reminiscing about shared birthday parties from elementary school and how close we used to be. Jake sent a casual text, acting like we were best friends, hinting that he could really use a new car. It was like vultures circling something they thought was easy prey. I tried to breathe through it, tried to remind myself that their need didn't obligate me. But the guilt clawed at me, not because I owed them anything, but because a small voice inside me, a voice trained through years of manipulation, whispered, "Maybe you're being selfish." Then one night, after yet another call from my mother, this time, her tone shifting from sugar-sweet to bitter and accusatory, I snapped. "You didn't include me in Tom's will because I wasn't really family. Remember that?" I said, my voice trembling. "Now suddenly I'm family again because I have something you want?" There was silence on the line. Then she muttered, "That's not fair." But it was, and I said so. Fair would have been treating me like a daughter before I had a dime to my name. I hung up before she could respond. The days that followed were quieter. I think my refusal shocked them. For so long, I had been the easy one, the one who apologized, who kept the peace, who shrank herself just to survive. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a woman who had clawed her way out of a home that never truly loved her. That night, I sat in my new kitchen, one I had bought with no one's help, and cried. Not out of regret, but relief. I hadn't lost anything by saying no. I had protected something precious, my peace. Still, I knew the storm wasn't over, because people who feel entitled never just walk away. I should have known she wasn't done. A few weeks after our heated phone call, my mother reached out again. This time, she wanted to meet in person. She said it was to clear the air. Against my better judgment, I agreed, but insisted we meet at a public cafe. I needed witnesses. I needed boundaries. She arrived dressed like she was attending a funeral. Her makeup perfect, her tone oddly sweet. "Jessica," she said with a tight smile, "you look well." I thanked her politely and waited. She made awkward small talk, asking about my job, my home, if I was seeing anyone. It felt rehearsed, like she was checking off boxes before getting to the real reason she came. And sure enough, she did. With a perfectly composed face, she leaned forward and said, "I think it's only fair that you write me a check for $1 million. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" She didn't flinch. "Technically, that inheritance came from your father's side. I was his wife. That money should have been mine." I was stunned. Not angry yet, just shocked. Her entitlement was staggering. "That money wasn't yours. It was Aunt Margaret's. She left it to me, specifically, because she wanted me to have it." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be naive, Jessica. You're just a placeholder. You should be grateful we even let you be part of this family." I felt a slow boil rise in my chest. I tried to stay calm, but my hands were shaking. "I'm not giving you $1 million, I said quietly. Her smile vanished like a switch flipped. "After everything we've done for you?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "You disowned me, remember? You cut me out of your will because I'm not your real child. You can't have it both ways." She leaned back in her seat, seething. "You've always been ungrateful, always thought you were better than us." I stood up. "No, I just finally realized I deserve better than how you treated me." I walked away without another word, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. It looked official. Law firm header, legal formatting, everything. My mother was suing me. Yes, suing me, claiming she had a right to a share of the inheritance as my father's widow, that I was withholding funds that rightfully belonged to her. I felt like I was in some twisted movie. I immediately called my attorney. After reading the letter, he laughed. "Jessica, this is a scare tactic. The so-called law firm isn't even real. The address listed is an abandoned strip mall. This isn't a lawsuit, it's a bluff." Still, I felt rattled. My mother had faked legal action to try and bully me into submission. She really was capable of anything. That night, I sat on my couch, lights dimmed, heart pounding. Not from fear, but from fatigue. I was tired of the emotional whiplash, tired of trying to protect myself from people who should have loved me, tired of having to constantly prove I had a right to what was given to me. I opened my laptop and booked a road trip. Nothing fancy, just a few spots Greg and I had always talked about visiting. I needed air. I needed silence. I needed to remember who I was before all this madness. As I packed, I thought of something my therapist once said: "People who love you don't need to be convinced to treat you well." That sentence echoed in my mind like a quiet anthem. I was done convincing. The trip was exactly what I needed. Greg and I packed up the car and hit the road. We visited quiet coastal towns, ate greasy burgers at roadside diners, and slept in tiny motels that smelled like sea air and freedom. For the first time in months, I wasn't waking up in a cold sweat or reaching for my phone in dread. I thought the break would give me peace. And it did, for a while. But peace never lasts long when your family sees you as a bank account instead of a daughter. A few days after we returned, I started getting texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Second cousins, old family friends, even a former babysitter. "Your mom says you're hiding millions from her. Is that true?" "I heard you stole from the family. That can't be right, Jess. Right?" I sat there in disbelief as the messages kept pouring in. I opened Facebook. Big mistake. My mother had been busy. She'd gone online and told anyone who'd listen that I had stolen the inheritance. She said Aunt Margaret meant for her to have it, that I had manipulated the will and was hoarding the money out of greed. There were vague, dramatic posts about betrayal, about daughters who forget their roots, and plenty of comments from people who didn't know me, condemning me like I was some villain in a made-up soap opera. And Tom? He sent me a long-winded, manipulative message. "You really need to think about what kind of person you're becoming. Family means helping each other, not hoarding what should be shared." It made me sick. This man who once told me I wasn't part of the will because I wasn't his real child was now pretending to care about fairness? I responded with one sentence. "You said I wasn't family. Remember that." He didn't reply, but the worst wasn't the social media lies or the texts from flying monkeys. It was the letter. At first glance, it looked official. Heavy paper, formal font, a firm name at the top. But something about it felt off. I handed it to my lawyer. Within minutes, he was shaking his head, chuckling bitterly. "This address? It's a boarded-up laundromat. Phone lines disconnected. This isn't a law firm. This is a last-ditch scare tactic." I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow. My own mother forged a fake legal threat. She created a false attorney to intimidate me. She didn't just want money, she wanted power. Greg found me crying in the kitchen later that night. Silent tears, the kind you don't even realize are falling until your sleeves are soaked. "I didn't ask for any of this," I whispered. "I just wanted a quiet life." Greg wrapped his arms around me and said, "And that's exactly what you'll have. We're not letting them drag us down." He was right, so I made a decision. I cut off contact. I blocked every number. I deactivated my public social media. I told my lawyer to prepare documents in case things escalated again, but more than anything, I started letting go. Of the guilt, of the hope they'd change, of the fantasy that maybe, someday, I'd be enough for them. They never saw me. Not really, not as a daughter, not as a person, but I do. And that's enough. After weeks of silence, just as I began to think the worst was behind me, a new nightmare arrived. This time in the form of a lawsuit. I had just returned from grocery shopping when I saw a thick manila envelope wedged into my mailbox. The return address was typed in all caps with no law firm name, just a string of numbers. My stomach sank. Inside was a cease and desist letter. From my mother. Well, supposedly, the letter claimed she was suing me for a share of my inheritance. It was riddled with legal jargon and vague threats. It accused me of unlawfully withholding family assets and deliberately defrauding blood relatives. I stood frozen in my kitchen, reading it 3 times before I even noticed my hands were shaking. Greg walked in and took one look at me before grabbing the paper from my grip. "This is nonsense," he said. "There's not even a bar number on this so-called attorney's signature." We immediately forwarded the letter to my real lawyer, Eric. He called back within 10 minutes, practically laughing. "Jessica," he said calmly, "this isn't a real lawsuit. The law firm doesn't exist. The address is for an abandoned storage unit in upstate New York. It's a scare tactic, a poorly done one." But the damage was already done. The betrayal felt fresh all over again. I sat on the couch staring at nothing while Greg made dinner, wondering how it had come to this. My mother had faked a lawyer to sue me over money that was never hers, after cutting me out of her own life, after making sure Tom excluded me from his will. I wasn't angry anymore. I was heartbroken. That night, I drafted the final message I would ever send her. No anger, no begging, no room for manipulation. You forged a legal threat and involved a fake attorney to steal money that doesn't belong to you. I will not tolerate criminal behavior from anyone, including you. From this moment forward, you are no longer a part of my life. Any further harassment will be met with legal action from my real lawyer. I sent it. I blocked her number. I blocked Jake's. I blocked Tom. I even deactivated my old email to stop the flood of guilt-tripping messages. And for a moment, it was quiet. But then came the Facebook explosion. My mother, fueled by desperation and venom, posted that I was a thief, that I'd betrayed my dying stepfather, and that I stole family inheritance to run off and live rich while the rest of us suffer. The comments rolled in. Cousins, distant uncles, people I hadn't spoken to since I was a teenager. Some accused me of being greedy. Others said nothing at all, just clicked like. But then something unexpected happened. Nathan messaged me. My youngest half-brother, now 14, sent a simple message. "I'm sorry, I miss you." That one sentence broke me. He was the only one who had never used me, never blamed me, never tried to guilt me into anything. He just missed me. I cried that night, not out of sadness, but relief. Somewhere someone still saw me for who I was. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, shaky spelling, a drawing of a smiling stick figure holding a balloon. "I'm sorry I asked for money. I miss you. I hope we can see each other sometime. Love, Nathan." I held that letter against my chest like it was gold. This inheritance hadn't bought me peace. It had torn the curtain off everything fake, everything rotten, but it had also shined a light on what was real. I didn't need a $1 million apology from my mother. I just needed to know I wasn't invisible anymore. And Nathan's words, they were the first brick in building something new. After blocking my mother and cutting off contact, I thought the storm might finally calm. I was wrong. A few days after sending my final message, I began receiving calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. Distant cousins, an old neighbor, even my dad's sister, Aunt Leslie, whom I barely remembered from childhood. "Jessica," one of them started, "your mother says you stole money from the family, that you forged the will." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only had she fabricated a legal letter, but now she was publicly accusing me of fraud. She told everyone who would listen that the inheritance I received from Aunt Margaret was rightfully hers, that as the widow of my late father, she deserved it all. Not only was this untrue, it was an outright lie, and now it was spreading like wildfire through our extended family. The guilt trips disguised as concern started pouring in. Jessica, are you sure this is what your father would have wanted? Family means sharing, not hoarding. I heard you're rich now. Must be nice. Maybe you could help out a little. Help out? These were the same people who ignored me at holidays, never sent a birthday card, and treated me like an outsider for years. Now suddenly I was their long-lost niece, cousin, or daughter again, because they believed I had something they wanted. It hurt, deeply. Not because of the money, but because of the constant reminder that, to them, I was never truly family unless I was useful. I started to withdraw from social media. I locked down my accounts, changed my number again, and even asked friends to stop tagging me in posts. But the real breaking point came when Tom, yes, Tom, the man who never once treated me like a daughter, sent me a long, self-righteous message. In it, he claimed that family unity was more important than legal documents. That regardless of who's named in a will, I had a moral obligation to redistribute some of my inheritance. He ended it with a line I'll never forget. You may not be my blood, but you owe this family your success. I read it 3 times before slamming my laptop shut. Greg found me on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, shaking with anger. She's turning the whole family against me, I whispered. They actually believe her. He sat beside me, placed his hand over mine, and said, Then stop explaining yourself to people who never cared in the first place. And he was right. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not for my success, not for my silence, not even for protecting myself. So I did something bold. I wrote a truthful, no-frills email and sent it to every family member who had contacted me about the inheritance. In it, I outlined the facts: Aunt Margaret's will, the legal process, my mother's lies, and the fake lawsuit. I included the cease and desist letter from my attorney stating that any further harassment would be considered defamation and could lead to legal consequences. I ended with this: You do not have to like me, but you will stop lying about me. I owe you nothing, not your version of justice, not your approval, and certainly not your forgiveness. If you can't respect my boundaries, stay out of my life. The silence after that was the loudest peace I'd ever known. The phone stopped ringing, the inbox went quiet, and the people who mattered, my friends, my mentors, even Greg's mom, kept showing up, kept loving me without condition. Nathan texted again the next day. Just wanted to say hi, hope you're okay. That little boy, he was the only one who saw the truth, and that meant more than any fake apology ever could. Just when I thought I had regained control, a letter arrived that made my stomach drop. It looked official, embossed envelope, formal font, even a fake legal watermark on the paper. At the top, Law Offices of Hensley and Carter. I didn't recognize the name, but the bold claim inside was crystal clear. You are hereby notified of pending legal action regarding inheritance claims. The plaintiff, your mother, asserts rightful entitlement to 50% of the estate of Margaret Evans. I blinked at the words, half expecting it to vanish like a hallucination. I reread the page again. My mother was suing me. Greg found me frozen at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands. She's taking me to court, I whispered. He grabbed the papers, read through them, and instantly frowned. This doesn't look right. We called my lawyer that afternoon. She took one glance at the documents and nearly laughed. Jessica, she said gently, this isn't from a real law firm. The address listed is for a condemned strip mall that burned down 3 years ago. The phone number doesn't exist. I was stunned. My mother had faked an entire lawsuit in a last-ditch effort to scare me into giving her money. The manipulation wasn't just emotional anymore. It had turned into psychological warfare, and I was exhausted. My lawyer sent a formal cease and desist letter within the hour, warning that any further attempts, fraudulent or not, would be met with real legal consequences. She also flagged the false documents for potential fraud investigation in case I wanted to press charges. I didn't. I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted to be left alone. But the emotional weight hit me hard that night. I curled up on the couch, surrounded by silence that didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt haunted, haunted by every version of me that had tried, for years, to earn love from a woman who only saw me as a bank account with a heartbeat. And the worst part? Somewhere in me, I still felt guilty, like I had done something wrong by saying no. Greg wrapped his arms around me that night and said, "You have to stop holding yourself to their rules. They don't define what family means. You do." And in that moment, I realized something profound. My mother was never going to change. She wasn't looking for connection. She was looking for leverage, for power, for control. And she'd use anything, lies, guilt, even fake legal threats to try and get it. That wasn't love. That was emotional terrorism. I wasn't going to let it win. So the next morning, I did something for me. I booked a short road trip. Just Greg and me. No phones, no emails, just silence and sky and space to breathe again. On the second day of our trip, while we were parked overlooking a quiet lake, I told Greg, "I don't think I've ever felt truly safe before." He looked at me and said, "Then let's build that now, together." And we did. We started talking about the future, not just in vague what-ifs, but in real plans. A home where I'd never be afraid to open the door. A family built on truth, not obligation. A future where I could finally trust my own peace. The letter may have been fake, but the message behind it was real. My mother never saw me as her daughter, only a means to an end. But I don't live for her anymore. I live for me, and that finally feels like freedom. It had been a few weeks since the fake lawsuit and my decision to cut off contact. Greg and I were back home, settling into our normal rhythm, when something unexpected arrived in the mail. A small envelope with handwriting that made my chest tighten. It was from Nathan, my 14-year-old half-brother. The same boy who just a few years ago was the center of our household while I was slowly being erased. Inside was a simple folded piece of lined notebook paper, the kind kids use in school. On it, written in slightly crooked but unmistakably careful handwriting. "I'm sorry Mom and Tom asked you for money. I don't think that was fair. I miss you sometimes. I hope you're okay." I stared at it for what felt like forever, my fingers trembling as I held the paper. There was no manipulation, no guilt, just honesty, sincere, quiet honesty from the one person in that house I had never truly held responsible. Nathan had never been the problem. He was just a child. He was still a child. And for the first time in years, I felt like someone in that family saw me, not as a wallet, not as a disappointment, not as an obligation, just as Jessica. Greg saw the letter and sat next to me, silent at first. Then he said, "He's reaching for something real. Just like you were all those years ago." I cried then, not out of pain this time, out of a strange mixture of grief and relief, grieving the version of me who never got a letter like this growing up, and relieved that maybe, just maybe, the cycle didn't have to continue with Nathan. So I wrote back. It wasn't long or complicated, just enough to let him know he wasn't forgotten. "Dear Nathan, thank you for your letter. It meant more than I can explain. I hope school is going well. I'm proud of you for being brave enough to write. I'm here if you ever need to talk." I mailed it the next morning, heart pounding, uncertain if I was opening myself up to more pain or planting the seed of something better. A few days later, a text pinged on my phone. It was Nathan. "Thanks for writing back. Can I call you sometime?" I showed Greg and he nodded. "It's your choice, but maybe this time, it won't hurt." I said yes. The first phone call was awkward, full of silences and short answers. But then he started telling me about his science fair project, and I laughed because I used to love those as a kid, until Jake spilled soda on my poster board and Tom blamed me for making a mess. Nathan didn't know that story, but somehow, he did. "I wish you lived with us still," he said quietly. "It was better when you were there." My throat tightened. "It wasn't better for me," I said gently. "But I'm glad you remember it that way." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry they hurt you," he whispered. "I've waited my whole life to hear someone in that house say those words. It wasn't an apology from my mother, not from Tom, but from a 14-year-old boy who didn't ask to be part of that dysfunction, but somehow still found the courage to speak truth, and it was enough. Maybe we'll never have the kind of sibling bond people write stories about. Maybe we'll never spend holidays together or have family dinners. But Nathan's message showed me that even inside a broken house, kindness can survive." That night, I saved his letter in a box labeled Real Family, next to Greg's first love note and a picture our son drew of the three of us together. Because this is family, not blood, but choice. A month after Nathan's letter, I found myself sitting by the window on a rainy Sunday, tea in hand, watching the droplets slide down the glass. The house was quiet. Greg and our son were out on a walk, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't bracing for a phone call, a guilt trip, or some new betrayal. But of course, silence doesn't always mean peace. I opened my laptop that evening and noticed an email from a name I hadn't seen in years. Jake, my former stepbrother, the golden boy who had once trashed my room during a house party and never faced a single consequence. The guy who sneered while Tom tore me down. I hadn't thought of him in a long time, at least not with any affection. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside, it was short. Too short for the weight it tried to carry. "Jessica, I know I've been awful to you. I've been thinking a lot lately, especially after everything with Mom. I heard what she did, trying to sue you, and I'm sorry, I don't expect anything, but I wanted you to know I regret how things went. Jake." I stared at the message for a long time. There was no request for money, no manipulation, just an apology, not wrapped in excuses, not padded with but or if. Greg walked in, drying his hair from the rain. He saw my face and sat beside me. "Another storm?" he asked, nodding toward the screen. I showed him the email. He read it in silence. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think you get to decide if this is a door worth opening," he said gently. I didn't reply to Jake, at least not right away. Instead, I reflected on everything I had been through. The years of silence, neglect, gaslighting. Being cut from a will because I wasn't real family. The fake lawsuit, the media smearing, the emotional manipulation, being told to give up my inheritance, to fix the lives of people who never lifted a finger for me. But I also remembered Nathan's letter, his apology, his effort. And I realized forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it's just letting the poison go so it doesn't continue to live in you. So I did reply, briefly. "Jake, thank you for saying that. I hope you're making peace with your choices. I've worked hard to heal, and I don't need anything else from the past, but I do wish you well. Jessica." And I meant it, because this wasn't about revenge. This was about freedom. The inheritance gave me money. But the truth, that came from learning how to choose myself. A few weeks later, Greg and I finalized the adoption papers for our son. We hadn't talked about it much publicly, but our little boy had always been ours in every way that counted. The judge asked if we wanted to add a middle name. Greg turned to me and smiled. We chose Hope, because that's what this story has become. Not one of bitterness, but of survival. Of finding family in the quiet places, between handwritten letters, early morning giggles, and soft words shared after long days. Sometimes family doesn't come from DNA. It's built, fought for, protected, and in my case, rebuilt from ashes. I closed the door on a past that never loved me right, and in doing so, I opened 1,000 more. I'm not who I used to be. I'm stronger, kinder, free. And I owe that not to who raised me, but to the girl who refused to be broken by them.